I saw the man who had baptized my children, who had married me and my husband, burning in hell. He wasn't a stranger, he wasn't some distant sinner. It was the very man I had trusted as my pastor. And what I saw that day, I can't unsee. You won't believe what I discovered about him. I didn't either. But this truth changed everything. And it could change your life too. My name is Olivia Evans. I am 42 years old, a mother of 3 and a wife. I grew up in a quiet, suburban neighborhood, where church was more than just a place we attended on Sundays. It was the center of everything. It was the heart of the community, the cornerstone of our lives. My father was an elder, my mother was a women's ministry leader, and we were always the family others looked to as an example. I memorized scripture before I could even walk, and from a young age I was taught that being good in the eyes of the church meant everything. I worked hard to stay within the lines, to always show up, to be a model of piety. Church was my life, and I thought I had it all figured out. But then there was Pastor William Matthews, the charismatic, soft-spoken leader who had been guiding our church for as long as I could remember. Everyone loved him. He preached with fire, spoke with such conviction that it was easy to fall in line, to believe that his words were divine. I admired him, I respected him, and yes, I even trusted him. He was, after all, the one man who led us to Christ, who offered counsel when life was difficult, who set an example of holiness for all of us to follow. Or so I thought. Over the years I began to notice subtle things that didn't sit right with me. Pastor William had this way of lingering too long with certain women, after church, often those who were new to the congregation, or those who seemed particularly vulnerable. There was an air about him that could only be described as predatory, but I couldn't bring myself to believe it. After all, he was a man of God. These thoughts were fleeting, and I quickly dismissed them. I assumed I was being overly cautious, perhaps even jealous. It was easy to brush it off, when I had 3 kids to chase around, a husband to take care of, and church events to organize. But then things started to unravel. It wasn't one specific moment that triggered my suspicion, it was the accumulation of small, subtle actions. I began to notice how his eyes would linger on certain women, how they would hang on his every word, especially during counseling sessions. I saw the way he would laugh a little too long at their jokes, how he would touch their shoulders, and how his tone would soften when he spoke to them. He was their shepherd, their guide, and they would follow him anywhere. I realized that they weren't just captivated by his sermon, they were enthralled by his attention. At first, I thought maybe I was just being paranoid, but then it was the whispers. Those whispers that started to grow louder in the corners of the church. I overheard one of the new members, Sister Lisa, talking to another woman about how kind and understanding Pastor William was, and how he helped her work through some personal struggles. That was when the knot in my stomach tightened. Personal struggle. Was she talking about things outside of spiritual counseling? Was there something more going on? My mind raced. I dismissed the thought. Pastor William was a man of God. This couldn't be happening. The final straw came one evening during a quiet Sunday after service. I had stayed behind to clean up, and as I walked past his office, I noticed the door was slightly ajar. I froze. I heard muffled voices inside. I couldn't make out the words, but I knew enough. I could hear the familiar tone of Pastor William's voice, smooth and soothing, and the voice of Sister Lisa, that same new member who had been so praise-filled just days earlier. I hesitated. Should I knock? Should I go in? But something told me not to. The conversation was too intimate, too personal. I turned and walked away, but the feeling of dread stuck with me. For days I couldn't shake it. Something was wrong. Pastor William, the man who led our church, the one I'd trusted, was hiding something. I didn't know what, but I knew I had to find out. That night, I went to bed feeling uneasy, as though something was pulling me, but it wasn't just a physical exhaustion from the day. It felt like my soul was being drawn somewhere I didn't want to go. I tried to sleep, but I couldn't. My mind raced. Why was I feeling so unsettled? What had I seen that day? At some point I drifted off to sleep, but what happened next was beyond anything I could have imagined. I woke up in a dark, cold place. Not my bedroom. Not a dream. It was as though I was standing in the midst of an endless, suffocating blackness. I could barely breathe, and my heart began to race with panic. I couldn't see anything around me, only the oppressive weight of silence and darkness. But then through the dense black, I saw him, Pastor William, he wasn't the man I knew. No, he was something else entirely. He was hunched over, his body covered in what looked like burns, his clothes torn and filthy, his skin cracked and seeping something dark. His eyes, those eyes I had always seen filled with kindness and compassion, were now black, empty, and filled with torment. He was kneeling in front of me, his face contorted with pain, his lips barely moved, but I could hear his voice, a voice that was both familiar and utterly alien to me. "Olivia," he said, his voice thick with anguish, "you don't know who I really am." I tried to speak, but no words came out. I tried to move, but I couldn't. I was frozen. I couldn't understand what I was seeing. This wasn't the pastor I had known, the man who led our church, the man I had trusted with my children's spiritual guidance. This man was a shell, a hollow version of the person I had revered. He looked up at me and I saw the torment in his eyes. "I never wanted you to know," he whispered. "I never wanted anyone to know, but it's too late now." In that moment, I saw flashes of his life that made my blood run cold. I saw him with Sister Lisa, the two of them entwined in a hotel room, their bodies tangled in sin. I saw him in his office late at night, sending inappropriate messages, whispering promises of things that no man of God should ever promise. And worst of all, I saw him in front of the congregation, preaching with his hands lifted high, his voice full of righteousness, all while hiding his lies behind the mask of holiness. I gasped, stumbling back, as the truth hit me like a physical blow. Pastor William wasn't who I thought he was. He wasn't the man who had led us in prayer, the man who had helped countless people with his counsel. He was a man playing a dangerous game, a game with souls, with power, with authority. And the worst part, he had led me into his lie, into his web of deceit. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I tried to run, but I couldn't move. And then from the depth of the abyss, a voice boomed, a voice that shook the very core of my being. I never knew him. And just like that, Pastor William, the man I once called my spiritual leader, vanished. The darkness consumed him, and with it, all the lies he had woven for so many years. I awoke with a start, gasping for air. Sweat covered my body, my heart pounding in my chest. I was back in my bed, but I wasn't the same. I had seen hell, I had seen the truth, and it was worse than anything I could have imagined. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't focus, I couldn't sleep. The image of Pastor William, broken, tormented, haunted my every waking moment. How had I been so blind? How had I trusted him? I started questioning everything I had ever believed. The man I had seen in hell wasn't just someone who had slipped up, or fallen into temptation. No, this was a man who had knowingly lived a double life. He had chosen his path, and it had led him straight to the gates of hell. I couldn't just sit back and do nothing. I had to expose the truth. I had to save others from the same fate. But when I tried to confront Pastor William, he denied everything. He acted as though I was just imagining things. He insisted that I was mistaken, that I didn't understand the pressures he was under, the burden of leadership. He even accused me of trying to destroy him. But I knew that the man who stood before me was not the same man I had followed for years. He was a deceiver, a wolf in sheep's clothing. I began to gather evidence. I went through the church records, the private messages, the notes that had been passed between him and his counselor. It was all there, his web of deceit, his manipulation, his control over the women in the congregation. It was as if he had set up an entire network to feed his desires, to satisfy his needs, all while pretending to be a man of God. I began to gather evidence. I went through the church records, the private messages, the notes that had been passed between him and his counselor. It was all there, his web of deceit, his manipulation, his control over the women in the congregation. It was as if he had set up an entire network to feed his desires, to satisfy his needs, all while pretending to be a man of God. I thought I had everything I needed to expose him, to bring the truth to light. But then I found something that stopped me in my tracks. A journal entry. It was in the back of his office drawer, hidden beneath papers, beneath the facade. The handwriting was familiar. It was Sister Lisa. My heart dropped as I read her words, as the full depth of the situation began to unfold. "I'm afraid of what will happen if anyone finds out I'm pregnant for Pastor William. I'm afraid of what he will do. But more than anything, I'm afraid of what will happen to my soul if I keep following him into this darkness. I feel like I'm already dead." The words burned into my mind. I was faced with a choice: expose the truth, and destroy the man I had trusted, or let it all go, and risk the lives of everyone else he was leading down the same path. The weight of that choice almost crushed me, but then I remembered what I had seen, what I had experienced in hell. This wasn't just about exposing a scandal, this was about saving souls, this was about standing up for those who were being led astray. So I did the unthinkable. I went to the congregation with the truth. I spoke openly about what I had discovered, about the lies I had seen unfold. And as I spoke, I felt the eyes of the church upon me. Some in disbelief, some in anger, and some in shame. But I knew one thing: I had to speak, I had to warn them. But even as I told my story, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was still out there, pulling the string. Was there more to this than just Pastor William? Was there something deeper, darker, that I had yet to uncover? As I walked away from that church, the weight lifted, but the questions remained. How many others are out there, hiding behind masks of holiness? How many others are living double lives, preaching truth, while secretly leading people to destruction? I need you to think about this. Are you living a life that reflects who you truly are, or are you just playing the part? Have you become blind to the masks around you? Could there be people in your life, in your church, hiding their darkest secrets behind their good deeds? Now I want to ask you something. What will you do if you find yourself in a situation like mine? Will you stay silent, or will you stand up no matter the cost and expose the truth? I've made my decision, now it's your turn. If this story moved you, if it made you question the people you trust or the life you're living, I want to hear your thoughts. Share your story, your experiences, or your fears in the comments below. Because this isn't just a story, this is a call to action. Will you take the mask off? Will you help expose the darkness in your own life? Or are you willing to let it continue in silence? The truth will always come out, whether we are ready for it or not. Are you ready to face it? Comment below, share. Let's uncover the truth together.